Hello and welcome, my name is Piera and today I'm here with my favourite trilogy recommendations. So I didn't realise, but this video has been actually highly requested, so I thought I'd finally fucking get around to doing it. But basically I wanted to introduce you guys, or not really introduce so much as just rant about how much I love my favourite trilogies. Some of these trilogies are quite popular, so you've probably already heard of them. Some of them I talk about a lot on my channel, some of them I don't talk about as much on my channel, but I still wanted to introduce you to them. Now the trilogies that I will be talking about today are trilogies that are completed, so that way you can read books 1 to 3. Hence why I've excluded any trilogies that still have either the second and third books to come out, or the third book. Or alternatively, like Red Rising, which I would have definitely recommended when it becomes a saga and there are more books coming. So Red Rising will not be in this video, but it's an obvious, please go read Red Rising. Anyway, we're gonna jump straight into it. Obviously, most of these are gonna be fantasy and or sci-fi because that is my main genre. What is going on here? So obviously the first trilogy that I'm going to introduce you to / enlighten your life is the Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. This is obviously the collector's edition. The actual editions look like that. And I love the Shades of Magic trilogy. Like, if you go hunting through my channel, you will find multiple reviews. You'll find a whole week where I was leading up to the final book in the trilogy, so I did a whole week of V.E. Schwab related stuff, which was super great for me. I loved it. But this is one of my favourite trilogies, and let me tell you why. So in A Darker Shade of Magic, we have 4 alternate Londons. Red London, Grey London, White London, and Black London. Black London no longer really exists because magic kind of took over and run rampant and basically destroyed it. Grey London is kind of our world, so it's the world where magic doesn't really exist. And that's where we meet one of our protagonists. Her name is Delilah Bard, and she is this I can't even explain to you. I love her so much I went and made a pop Funko figure of her because she is fantastic. Now, how do I describe Delilah Bard? Delilah Bard is who I'd like to be in my waking life. Red London is where we meet our second protagonist, Kel. And Kel is an Antari, which is, he's kind of like a wizard. He can pretty much just use elemental magic. And he uses that elemental magic to travel between each of the Londons, which pretty much no one can do. And then we have White London, which is kind of the threshold between Black London and Red London. So White London is still kind of, you know, reeling from the effects of Black London and how that kind of affected them, and also being in the middle of a Red London which is flourishing with power. Magic is like widely accepted, they love it. And that's ruled by the 2 antagonists, the Dane twins. Now on one fateful day when Kel, our Antari, travels to Lila's Grey London, she pickpockets him, and she pickpockets him of a very important magical object. Hence how these 2 paths collide. And then basically for the rest of that book they are on the run from the evil Dane twins who are trying to harness the power of the thing that Lila stole, whilst a bunch of other things are going on. Bad synopsis, not the point. The point is, I fucking love this trilogy. It's got a great cast of diverse characters, it has incredible world building. V.E. Schwab is just some sort of literary goddess. I can't even explain to you. She's one of my favourite authors. I'll buy anything she writes for the rest of my life. She's phenomenal. Book 2 is definitely my favourite in the series. The book 2 is called A Gathering of Shadows, and that one focuses on the Essentage, which is pretty much just like a big magical elemental games, where all these different magicians come from all around Red London to compete in this tournament of power. And of course, still reeling from the effects at the end of A Dark Shade of Magic, our lot find themselves involved in that in ridiculous ways. Which of course leads us to our incredible conclusion in A Conjuring of Light, where all of the things and the ties that have started from book 1, book 2, all end up sort of resolved in book 3, and it kind of all comes to a head. In saying sort of resolved in book 3, I pretty much mean V.E. Schwab has announced that she will be writing more books in the world. So not necessarily from those points of view, but different in the same world, which we've been led to believe will still include some of our favourite characters from the original trilogy. I added this one in because I literally just forgot that she had said that until literally mentioning it now. So it still counts, I'm still gonna put it in. Read the Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. Next up, I would like to introduce you to the Broken Empire trilogy by Mark Lawrence. There is a feather on that, which is Prince of Thorns, King of Thorns, and Emperor of Thorns. Now the Broken Empire trilogy was one of my more recent reads. I picked up Prince of Thorns after I'd had it on my TBR shelf for like well over a year and just never got into it. I had tried reading the first like 5 pages a few times and just didn't like it. Eventually pushed past those 5 pages and was instantly fucking sucked in. Like, why did I not pick it up sooner? I smashed through the whole trilogy in about 2 days because I enjoyed it so much. Now, in Prince of Thorns, we follow a young Prince George Ancraft. I say George, it's spelled J-O-R-G. It's probably pronounced Yorg or Gorg or something fucking ridiculous, but for my sake I went with George, right after the horrible murder of his mother and his younger brother, whilst he was also nearby but trapped and couldn't help them. George goes home to his father. His father is a real tool, but George has also discovered that he has developed some sorts of powers. Whilst his family was being murdered, he was trapped in a thorn bush, and it's pretty much just a power that the thorns have left him with. Thus ensues George's journey of revenge and just general fucking chaos. Now, I had problems with this book, and then I also just fucking loved it. Now, the problems that I have with this book, when we meet George, he's like 14, and he's doing all these things that are like badass and cool and bloody and gross, and like you're just like a 14-year-old boy doing all these things, and the way he projects himself is just like, to me, it rubbed me wrong, because I'm like, oh, I don't know, like I was pretty useless at 14. I wasn't a 14-year-old boy whose family had just been murdered and left with superpowers, but you know what I mean? So that took like a good couple pages for me to get through, to be like, okay, alright, okay. And he ages quite slowly throughout the trilogy. Like, he starts at 14, hits 16, 18, and then 20 by the end of it. So he's still quite young, and he achieves / goes through so much that it was a little, I want to say unbelievable, but then there's also, you look at other things that are in this book, and you're like, well, how does that make it unbelievable? Anyway, that was my main ugh. My other main ugh was, the world is so broad and vast, and there's also kind of history in it, but that's the more undertone of the story. The world in which George lives is actually our Earth, but many, many years in the future. So you definitely hear of, like, you know, old Africa and old Europe and stuff like that. So that's always weird but enjoyable. And like I said, that was kind of the second thread of the plot as opposed to George's main plot. Hello, small bird, where's your brother? Hi. Tactus has come to hang out. So that was the other thing, just kind of wrapping my head around. There's so much history and there's so much world building, there is so many fucking characters, just trying to remember all of those things. And I flipped to the map like every 10 pages because they were on the move. The other thing that actually wasn't brought to my attention until I'd finished reading and I didn't really realize, but I did sort of realize, but I didn't realize hardcore, is the lack of female characters and strengths in this series. Now we have, I think, maybe 3 leading females that I can think of. We have one who is a necromancer, who's probably our main female, and she's just a really fucking questionable character. The second character that we have is George's Aunt Catherine, who also becomes a love interest. Like, don't even get me started on the incest that was happening back in these fantasy worlds. It's not really incest, she's like, her sister married his dad. Weird. Anyway, and she becomes like this point of romance, not even romance, just like longing and wanting and obsession for George, which like it's a little weird, but it's not like, and so she just becomes this, it's not a plot point, but a plot point. She doesn't kind of offer anything, like she's still a badass, like all the interactions that we have with her are pretty cool. Like, she's not fawning over him, she's not just there to drive him further, but she's also kind of there to drive him further, if that makes sense. And then the third character we have is his young princess wife, who I actually like the most. She's ballsy for a 12-year-old, which I know, I get it, a young 12-year-old bride, fucking weird, but it's very much a Tyrion and Sansa sort of vibe, if you know what I mean. So, still weird, but she was a really cool character. Like, she was really smart, she was really charismatic, she knew what was going on. There's also like a prequel sort of side set of series called Road Brothers, which came out recently, gives us a bit of backstory. There's a few other stories about George, and there's a few other stories about his road brothers, which are basically when we meet George, he's with this kind of ragtag pack of murderers, assassins, thieves, killers, all that sort of stuff. A lot of those are the same thing. And so we get more stories about those brothers that he's with, because they obviously stick with us through a lot of the books. Now the next trilogy I want to introduce you to, because I want to say not many people have heard of this series, even though I talk about it not often, but a fair bit. And that's the Demon Child trilogy by Jennifer Fallon. Now, Jennifer Fallon is an Australian writer. These are old books. Like, this one was published in, okay, they're not that old. This book came out in 2000. Sorry me. So 18 years ago this book came out. And so therefore it's your really old fantasy. So it's got none of any kind of the social commentaries of today, whereas it's literally just like your old fantasy, if that makes sense. So, for example, in Medallon we meet Rachel, who is half demon, half human. Obviously she doesn't know that until she finds out. The daughter of one of the Sisters of the Blade, who are kind of this oppressive, overruling force over their country. So basically, some shit ensues, Rachel is going to be shipped off, and Tarja is off to be imprisoned, but they basically escape that and take off across the country, where they hear all these stories about this magical race of people called Hashini. And as far as everyone knows, the Hashini are extinct. But then we meet a Hashini outcast named Brack, and that is not his full name. His full name goes on for like 6 more characters. And he's looking for the demon child, which just happens to be Rachel. And whilst Rachel and Tarja are on their way to join kind of the rebellion against the Sisters of the Blade, they meet Brack, and obviously chaos ensues. So now, as I said, this book, because it is so old, there are a lot of themes like, you know, there's a lot of slavery, and there's a lot of abuse, and there's a lot of rape, and there's a lot of bad things that are kind of, I wouldn't even say glazed over, but they're not given the kind of treatment that we would give them if that book was written today. So that's another thing to keep in mind if you are, I guess, sensitive to all those sorts of topics, that they are in this book and they aren't shied away from. They're on the page and they're pretty brutal. I picked them up just randomly because I was looking for some fantasy. I picked them up at a Lifeline. I picked them up after reading The Liar Thief by Jennifer Fallon, which came out the year before last, which is now kind of an extension of the world because she has a few other trilogies written in that world, just not focused on Rashil. Rashil obviously plays a part in all of them, but not from her point of view. So that's why I picked them up. Anyway, like, they were a really good read. They were like a big, thick fantasy world. They're that sort of original classic fantasy, which is why I enjoyed them so much. So again, if they're not for everyone either, they're probably for your like more mature adult readers, but I did really enjoy it. The next trilogy everyone probably already knows about, but I'm just going to jump on board, and that is The Illuminae Files by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. Now this is book 1, book 2 is Gemina, book 3 Obsidio. Now this is where my problem with space comes in. I fucking hate books set in space. Don't know why, I just really don't like it. It's because like I just can't imagine them well enough, but which is why, you know, it's ironic that my favorite book series is Rising, and that I absolutely fucking love The Illuminae Files. Now the Illuminae Files are basically, you know, there's these people, they live up in a different planet, their planet ultimately gets bombed by some bad guys, and then they're kind of set on the run in these ships across the world to A, figure out what happened, and B, fix it. In each of the 3 books we follow 2 different points of view characters, but even then the books aren't set like normal books, which is originally what threw me off reading them for so long because I like just a nice novel. But this book is set like files, so there are pictures, there are chat logs, there are literally, like, it's just literally a set of files. And they do it so well that you wouldn't even know. It reads like a novel. Obviously, there are some made up words in there which drive me nuts, but I still really, really love the way it's done, and like I don't know any other books that are kind of done like that, so which is why I really enjoyed it, and everyone is obviously super hyped about it. I feel like I don't need to say much about it because I know a lot of people already know what it is about. But if you haven't read The Illuminae Files and you are into that sort of stuff, definitely go and pick that one up. Now the next 2 I'm not going to say too much about because they are quite old trilogies, and I know a lot of people have already read them, but if you have not read them and you're interested in my opinions, this is them. So basically the first one is the Legend Trilogy by Marie Lu, and the second one is the Daughter of Smoke and Bone Trilogy by Laini Taylor. The Legend Trilogy follows our 2 main characters, June and Day. Now June is this, I guess, kind of a young soldier. She lives in the Republic, goes to this fancy school, she's smart, her brother's part of the military, until one day he's murdered. And basically people are assuming that Day has killed her brother. Day, by this point, is just this rebel outcast, this wanted kind of character. And so obviously that sets June on the kind of mission of finding Day and I guess getting revenge for her brother's murder. But obviously through that we unlock a bunch of other things like corruption, romance, all that sort of fun stuff. Now Legend was one of the first trilogies that I ever read. I discovered Legend off of, I think, user-based casting when Maximum Ride was around, which is why I really enjoyed it. Like, it's a young, easy YA fantasy series. You know, it's full of, you know, your romance and your angst and all that sort of stuff. So a couple years ago I was absolutely obsessed with it. Daughter of Smoke and Bone Trilogy, again by Laini Taylor. Absolutely magical. In Daughter of Smoke and Bone we meet Karoo, who lives with a bunch of chimera, who are obviously not fully human. In the real world, kind of set in Prague, but also with doorways through to this magical world. And so we just kind of follow Karoo on her journey of kind of figuring out her past, because it's not all that clear, as well as the general fight between angels and chimera. Because of course the angels come to cause havoc. I did a terrible job at summarizing those, but that's that. Are you right? Anyway, so those were a few of my trilogy recommendations. Obviously there's a ton more out there, but those are the ones on the top of my head that I really, really enjoyed when I read them. If you guys have any trilogy recommendations for me, definitely chuck them in the comments down below because I am always looking for a good series. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to like and subscribe if you did. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Okay, bye!